Hey, Surge community. Welcome to another episode of Surge Straight Talk. My name is Amanda Chaco, and I am the director of Surge. Today, I will be speaking with entrepreneur and Surge mentor, Matt Gira. Matt caught his entrepreneurial bug back in college, where he was co-founder of the Techstars startup Fathom Drones. From there, he went on to help develop collegiate entrepreneurship programs for both Hope College and Grand Valley State University. Today, he has taken that collective wisdom to launch FounderCo, an organization that helps entrepreneurs become great founders. Today, Matt's going to share his own entrepreneurial journey, lessons learned, and his vision for FounderCo. Please help me welcome Matt Gira. Hey, Matt. Welcome to Surge Straight Talk. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we were able to coordinate our time together. So before we get into the meat of the discussion, which will be FounderCo, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of like your own entrepreneurial journey? When did you get bitten, by the bug, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so I have been bit pretty early on with entrepreneurship. So basically my last week of high school, for some reason, I have still to this day, I don't know where it came from. It was like, I just started thinking of ideas and was like talking to friends and teachers and like, this is the last week of high school. Like we're all supposed to be like, yay, like we're done and out of there. But for some reason, like I had all these ideas. So I was kind of like playing around with ideas the summer before college, went to Hope to go get a degree in chemistry or something along the lines of like material science, because I was like convinced I was gonna go get a PhD in like materials that are like environmentally sustainable, like sustainability kind of stuff. That was kind of where I was heading. Really passionate about that at the time. So went to Hope, was in engineering and chemistry classes, and there's an intro to engineering class at Hope that's pretty popular, especially if you're a first year student. And went through that and just had all these different ideas come through that, because that's basically just like idea central. So did that, started building prototypes, then ended up talking to that professor, and he's like, hey, you need to talk to this guy named Scott Brandonisio. And like timing was perfect. It was like that night, because I met with the professor in the afternoon, and that night ended up seeing Scott in the engineering lab, and didn't see him he was actually working on his startup at the time called ReamCam, literally in that meeting. And I was working on mine. He didn't know me, but I knew him. And I emailed him like the night after, or like later that night, because I wasn't able to actually talk to him. And he's like, yeah, let's meet. And then all of a sudden I was involved in the entrepreneurship program, and things just got spiraling where I was to the point where I was like, I'm spending more and more time than I thought I would be doing like entrepreneurial things. And I was like doing research and things like that. So that's kind of where I got started. And then it's just been a snowball effect from there.
Wow. So is it at that point that you started thinking about Fathom, or did you have some other ideas that you worked on before that?
Yeah, so there's been a few different ideas before Fathom showed up. It was first I was working on like a chair thing, like that was my kind of initial thing I was playing around with, and then the bigger one before Fathom was called jam jars, which they were mason jar speakers, basically hoping to bring like,
I remember
yeah,
those.
yeah. I think they pitched to you like really early on. So yeah, we did those, and those did okay. Those were kind of fun. I got to be hands-on, which was always kind of fun. Learned a lot through that, and then while I was working on that, that's when I met the guys I ended up building Fathom with. So yeah, there's a few things that led to Fathom, but yeah.
Okay. And for those that are not familiar, what is Fathom?
So Fathom was an underwater drone company. We mainly built underwater drones. So just like these aerial drones you see in the air nowadays, we built them for underwater. So our market was mainly like scuba divers and boaters. That was our main like two markets.
Okay. And then what transpired? I know that you guys are in Techstars, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so Fathom has a crazy story too, because so Fathom, it was the summer of my junior year at Hope, and there was these guys I was living with, and we're all doing, I mean, if you're around Holland, which obviously most people watching this are, Hope is really known for their research, and there's a bunch of students on campus, typically, probably not this summer, but Typically there's usually a bunch of Hope students just like doing research and living together. It's like summer camp, except you get paid to do summer camp. And we were doing research all together. And one of my friends came up to me and was like, hey, you need to go talk to Danny because Danny's an ideas person. He's always like spouting ideas to us. We never know what to do with him, but you're one of the few people who actually knows what to do because you're in this entrepreneurial thing and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, okay. So then like a week went going by and Danny was like sitting there at the like it was like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like making dinner and he just like sitting there like doing whatever he was doing. I was like, hey, I hear you have some ideas. And then like from there, it was like literally every night I'd come home and it was like idea after idea, like pitch idea, pitch idea, pitch idea. And we did that. And then from there, it was like we left for the summer. Like 2 weeks later, I get a text message like, what about an underwater drone company? And I'm like, those have to exist. Like the aerial drones were just taking off at that time. Like underwater has to exist if the aerials are just like taking off. And he's like, Google it. So I literally spent my entire night like trying to find an underwater drone company that was like easy to use, affordable, and like all these other things. And didn't exist. I'm like, wow, okay, maybe there's an opportunity. So that's when Danny brought, a few of us on board. We came together. Um, we had a bunch of like, what, 2 out of the 4 guys were engineering students. I had this like chemistry background, which didn't really help at that time, but I had more of the entrepreneurial background because I was already doing it for about a year or two at that point. So I was like, let's go do a pitch competition. You guys build prototypes. Let's just see what happens. So we did. We went to the Accelerate Michigan competition, like the student competition when they existed.
Oh, cool.
And literally with like really bad pitch deck, really bad prototype, like 3D printing thing, didn't even work. It was just like basically like a model. And I remember like people are coming up to us and like they're like, you guys are amazing. Like you guys should be in the final round. All this, we thought like we're gonna win this thing. We didn't make it to the final round, unfortunately, but we felt really good. It was like gave us a lot of validation. We met a lot of people. Um, then we got through the Emerge Accelerate program, which is a $20,000 investment. We were definitely the youngest team in that program. That was like a accelerator, I guess. And then that was in Grand Rapids. Went through that. I got the opportunity to go through Yale's Entrepreneurship Institute in the same summer. So we were getting loaded up on like the educational side of entrepreneurship. And then right after that, we kind of switched products a little bit. That senior year came, we're like, all right, like let's see what we can do. We had hit BBC and Discovery News. So we were also sitting on like 1,000 emails at the time of potential customers. So we're like, okay, we have some traction points of like, we've won a little bit of money. I think at that point we had like $30,000 in the bank, or like total what we had kind of saved up from like pitch competitions and things like that. Then took that to the summer of 2016, and we ended up doing a $200,000 Kickstarter campaign. Most of that came in like 6 days. I think like 90% of it did.
Wow.
So yeah, crazy stories of that I probably blabber on for forever about that story, but
We'll have another Surge Straight Talk on Kickstarter.
yeah. So that was a fun experience when we did that. And then about a year after that, we went through Techstars. We got in through going through that program, and we weren't even going to apply, honestly, because I didn't think we fit. At that time, it was Techstars mobility, and
Yeah.
mobility like wasn't something we thought, like I never thought we were.
Hmm.
Still to this day, I don't really consider. I think we're on the gray zone, but
Underwater mobility, that counts.
yeah, it was always an interesting conversation. But yeah, I think like after Danny Ellis from SkySpecs recommended us to go through it, and then like it just had like it was like a week of like 3 people who had never talked to one another like recommending that we apply to it, and I'm like, okay, that's like a sign we need to apply. And then all of a sudden like we got in. So crazy story with that. They ended up like helping us raise a little bit of a round. We raised about like 200K from investors from that. So really kind of pieced it together. And then about a year after that, we shipped product. We shipped about 500 units out from that. And then probably like 6-7 months after that, we ended up shutting it down. So that's like
So
the whole story.
what was the trigger for shutting it down?
So basically it was, okay, like we shipped the first units in July, I believe it was like July, August, late July, early August was when we first started shipping first units. And by the end of October, we had all the like pre-orders pretty much shipped out. And so we were running out of money because we had basically put all of our money and resources into shipping these units out. And our investors knew that. And I ended up sending an email like that November saying, maybe like early October, late October, saying like, hey, like, let's see what we can do this Christmas season. If we can't sell during Christmas season, what's the point? Like, what's the point of us existing? And everyone's like, yep, let's do it. Let's not like, let's see what we can do this Christmas season. If we can't sell, like, we'll make a decision from there. And we sold okay. It wasn't like, nothing to be like super excited about. It wasn't something to be super disappointed about either. Um, but then, December 26th, which is the big day for all consumer companies, because that's the big return day. Pretty much every single unit was coming back for different technical issues.
Oh no.
So yeah, so that was it was like Christmas Day. I was like super nice and stay off, and then like to get all those emails the next day, it was not fun. So that was an interesting experience. And then we got back probably like the second day of January. We kind of took the week off, and yeah, we went from there. And the technical team went through it, and we're like, hey, like we can't, like we have to redo this whole thing and like restart from scratch. And that's something we just couldn't do because we didn't have our team was burnt out from just everything going on that we just went through a 4-year stretch of really just trying to get this product to market. We didn't have the cash to do it. It probably would have taken at least $2 million. Most hardware companies raised $2 million. We raised total like 500,000. So we did things on a shoestring budget. That was kind of the name of the game, which looking back probably wasn't the best decision. But yeah, that was it was kind of a timing too. A lot of we tried to like talk to our competitors afterwards, try to sell assets, and all of them like, we're actually in a similar boat. Like, we're not doing so well either. Like the market's just not ready. So there was a whole like just slew of things that came together at the right time. It's all together, and it was like made more sense to shut it down. So
Wow. So in retrospect, like what would you have done differently?
there's so many different things we do differently. It's another like you could probably write a book on this, but I think one is like first one is being more problem oriented rather than solution oriented. Having a really technical team, it was really hard to do that because we just love tech. And I think at the time I was always like, oh, I can figure this out as we go. And looking back, I think that should have never been my mindset. It should have been like, no, let's take a step back and really figure out the problem from there. Because from day one, it was always like, everyone's always asking us, like, what's the problem you're solving? And I'm like, it's more of an opportunity. I would play like this game with people. So which didn't really work out, obviously. So that was probably, number one thing that we probably did differently. Two, I think we had a good team, but I don't necessarily think we always fit together. I think there was probably, like everyone's super talented, but I think the pieces didn't always fit together just in terms of like, skill sets and things like that and the way we match. So I think that's probably like the second thing is like team super important is getting that to fit. And it's not necessarily the talent, it's really the fit. Like, does everyone get along, and does all the skill sets fit along together? Like you've seen a lot of this too. So I think it's just a lot of it needs to all fit. And then three, I think, hardware is really hard. And I think if I was going to do hardware again, it'd have to be like something with recurring revenue or like subscription based, because yeah, hardware, like just doing it like as a retail is super difficult. And you can see it even if you look at any hardware data, even if you raise hundreds of millions of dollars, not necessarily guarantee your success either at this point.
Wow. Those are some good lessons for sure. And yeah, I know you're definitely not alone because we see that quite often. So, which brings me to, all of your experience now in you're working with Yale and Hope and Grand Valley and, developing those college entrepreneurship programs. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So another interesting dynamic in being like where I was that, I went through Yale's entrepreneurship program, went through Emerge Accelerate at the time. Um, and it was help. I came back from Yale, and the whole purpose of me going to Yale is help build out Hope's program, and bring that knowledge from Yale and bring it back. That was kind of the whole purpose. So I was doing that my senior year, and by then, right as literally I think it was like the last week of classes at Hope, the director of the entrepreneurship side of things at Hope was like, "Hey, I'm taking off. I'm leaving for this other university." And they're bringing in someone new. I'm like, okay, like that's interesting. Like I'm graduating, so it's not a big deal. But then, about a week later, the director that was coming in was like, hey, like, could you come in as an EIR and like really help me build this program, because you're probably one of the few people that actually knows like how to actually build a program like this. I'm like, okay.
And just for
Um,
people that don't know, what's an EIR?
Oh yeah, EIR being entrepreneur in residence. So basically, it's like this like really vague term. So because you do a really vague job, and you can do a little bit of everything. So at different schools means different things. That's what I really learned in all this process. So um, yeah, so they brought me in, and then I was help building up. We literally built a summer program within 2 weeks, and we launched it, which is another interesting dynamic.
So when it comes to like working with student entrepreneurs and developing those programs, I know a lot of schools have like more of the educational, how to run a business type, entrepreneurship programs. And then, sometimes there's just like, hey, launch your company program, with some structure and framework. So did you kind of have like a combination of that? And where do you see, from your experience working with students, what are their greatest needs, and what do you think is most helpful to them when it comes to these types of programs?
So I think the way every university kind of has their own, I think that's been the cool part of being able to see at Hope, Yale, and Grand Valley. They all have their like different flavors of doing things or different ways of like I operate. There's a different culture on each campus. Like they're all very different. Um, so I think that was something that I really picked up, especially like coming back from Yale and then coming to Hope, be like, yeah, this is a lot different. Like we gotta tweak it. And I think from I've seen from student entrepreneurs, there are some like common themes. One is that even if you go to Yale or wherever, like the biggest thing is like people need like that permission to go do it. Because in certain like for me, like entrepreneurship meant you were unemployed. So for, like entrepreneurship not always a positive word. So I think it's giving people the permission to go start that business and give like a give them that hope that like yeah you can actually go do this. That's I mean we spent so much time just doing that and oh we just this personal development saying like yeah you can do this like how can you like structure your day or like your time doing that. So we spent a lot of time doing that. Number two is just getting them to not get like the bright light syndrome where like, oh, that's a shiny object or like, oh, that's a really cool opportunity. Let's go chase it. Like not chasing after every opportunity. Especially I did that quite a bit. I was like, ooh, that's a cool opportunity. Like, we'll just take it. And then all of a sudden, like we're 6 months down the line. We're like, why are we doing this? So that was always a, stay focused on the right things kind of focus. That's something I've been trying to be better at coaching things through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the other thing is, giving them a community around them too, because I think student entrepreneurship, especially going through Hope and Grand Valley, which they don't have a ton of student entrepreneurs walking around, at least not at the moment. So giving them like, hey, like there's actually is a group of you that are like trying to build businesses here, like work together. I think that was a cool part of Hope is that we had really built that community up. I mean, that was real. I mean, I get text messages or Slack messages at Friday night at 10 o'clock and like all of them are messaging me because they're all in the engineering lab together working on their business. Like,
That's great.
it's super annoying that it's happening at 10 o'clock at Friday night. It was like,
Yeah, you're
um,
still young, you can
it
handle
was still, yeah, it was actually like super encouraging though too, because it was like, all right, like this is a dedicated group, and if they're gonna be dedicated, like I'm gonna like reward that too. So,
it. Right.
super cool. And even when their businesses failed, like I still have relationships built with them, and I think that's the name of the game is like you're just building that community and that culture, and I think that's what we're starting to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So now with your startup experience and then your teaching experience, you kind of put that all together to launch FounderCo. So tell us about FounderCo.
Yeah. So FounderCo kind of came through. So I was leaving Hope at 2018, the end of 2018, and then Fathom obviously was shutting. Like we were getting close to that decision, so I kind of left both at the same time or some really similar times. Um, and I was like, all right, I want to do something new, but I don't want it to be like I want to do something within like entrepreneurial support, but also like be a founder too. So um, really like we just kind of started doing workshops together. We partner with you at Surge and we work on Start Garden a little bit. Like how do we actually, support entrepreneurs and like I had like, all these workshops I could teach. So I was literally bringing those out and be like, all right, I'll just like start teaching, like we'll just do them every other week and we'll bounce back and forth between Grand Rapids and Holland and just see what we can do and see what's helpful. And literally just like on this listening tour for the last, a year and a half now. Just really, okay, how do we actually figure out what's working, what's not? And went down this path and really the ultimate goal being like how I mean from our standpoint for Fathom was always we're a tech company hardware and that was like every investors especially or like a lot of the resources in Michigan aren't necessarily built for that Most places aren't built for that, which is okay. Like you can't cover everything in the local thing. So we've been trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually get these resources so that you can stay in these local, like these smaller ecosystems like a Holland or Grand Rapids, but also get the same resource that you would if you were in like Chicago or, New York, San Francisco. So that's what we've been really trying to figure out, like how do we do something or like just help build the ecosystem in a really good way, in a collaborative way. So yeah, now we've kind of, I think, figured it out where I think this is probably the most refined we've ever been, which is exciting for my mental stability and also for our, like the little team I've built up from her FounderCo too. So now we're doing a lot of just like mentor matchmaking. And so basically right now, the way it's working, and we're just piloting it, we just have founders, they submit it, it's a form, it takes literally 2 minutes. And then from there, we literally take that data and then try to go match people to you that might be helpful. So we're trying to see how this works, and from there we're going to build from there. But yeah, so I think we're 2-3 weeks out of seeing if this current model works. But I think so far, like this is probably this is like the biggest light or like the most opportunity, like most positive I think we felt about like what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I really love that idea of, broadening that network of resources for entrepreneurs because it's a big world and there are a lot of great people out there that could definitely help. And to be able to join something like FounderCo and reach, mentors in other parts of the country, I think would be, I think that's really unique. There's not a lot of organizations that have the ability to do that, but with your experience and being part of Techstars and just your personal network that you've built, I think that's definitely a unique value proposition that you have personally that now FounderCo has. So in addition to the mentor matching, you also do workshops, you have a podcast, you have a blog. So tell us about those.
Yeah, so we made the conscious decision about a year ago of like, hey, if while we're learning, like, let's just build content because content is going to be super helpful. I've been learning way more about content and the value of it. So I made the conscious decision about a year ago of like, we're gonna spend time and resources on this because we're still figuring this out. And like, I want to at least have something more fully figured out that like we can kind of lean on. So we've literally been doing just build like we have a podcast. We have actually two of them. One is way more active than the other right now, but the other one start getting active. And the first one's called Founder Feedback. And basically it's me bringing in mostly my network of like founders that have like super experienced, super like people I super respect. And it's talking about like they're telling their story for like 5-10 minutes of the podcast. And then we get into like, the problems that like early stage entrepreneurs go through because that way you can kind of see how these experienced people like have done it and think through these different problems. I think that was something that I lacked, like going through Fathom. Was like I didn't always have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Or else I didn't have that wisdom around me all the time of like, okay, how do people get through this or that? Especially when it comes to like fundraising or like building a team or
Right.
um, all these different things that you think you're doing the right thing and then you look back and like, oh, I did the wrong thing there. So we're really just trying to bring the wisdom to like the podcast experience and like getting founders to talk really authentically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really cool for me to see it and actually talk to these founders about these issues because it's like I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought you would have responded that way, or that's how you did it. And so that's been really cool. And then the second one we do is called Inside the Ecosystem, and that one's basically so you can kind of see what's happening in different ecosystems around the United States. So
Cool.
just bring it on. Yeah. So if you're interested in like, I know we have some people from Raleigh coming in and like we've had come in. So we're really just trying to bring in, so you can kind of get a flavor of what these different cities and ecosystems look like. So
Yeah,
there's that. We're building up this. Yeah, we have workshops we're building out, and then obviously our blog too.
that's awesome. So how could people learn more about FounderCo and access all of these things?
Yeah, so if you go to founderco.org, everything is on there. If you hit the join button, there's literally that form to submit like information to match you. And then if you go to content, that has all of our content in there too. You can listen on our website for the podcast. Or you can go to a podcast app too.
That's great. So do you have any last words of wisdom or anything you'd like to share?
Oh man, you talk to Amanda whenever you need something because Amanda's amazing. That's probably number one.
I am
Especially
to
in
say that. Thank you.
But obviously, I mean, I'm really bullish on Holland. I think like everything that's happening has been really cool. It's definitely grown, I think, in a really awesome way since I was a student entrepreneur. I remember like being like, what's all happening? And then now it's like pretty obvious what's happening, which is pretty sweet. So that's been really cool to watch grow and take off. So I'm like super excited about that. But I think, at the end of the day, I think as a founder, it's really easy to get like into the weeds and just like constantly be working. But I think it's also really important to get your head out of the weeds and actually go talk to people, especially in your community. So definitely go do that. And then also just like take chances and don't be afraid to be out there a little bit. And if there's anything I can be helpful with, like feel free to contact me at any point too.
Perfect. Well, we look forward to watching FounderCo evolve, and certainly Serge will point people your way. So
Cool.
thanks again. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks for having me.